Thank you, Monica. It's great to be here. Thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of your day today to talk about how to create these memorable customer experience, the points of interaction. And we think about this every day as we go through our days about what kind of interactions do we like. And I know a lot of things have changed with what we experience as customers when it comes to those interactions with the brands that we love and do business with. Not every company we do business with necessarily do we love. So let's start with a blank slate. If you were to think of an image of a memorable customer experience, what would come to mind? And I invite you to drop this into chat so we can see the variety of things that everybody here today thinks of when they think of a memorable customer experience. Now, it could be something like you checked into a hotel and they bumped you up to a nicer room. It could be maybe you got bumped up to first class on an airplane. It could be you got the best table at the hottest restaurant in town. Just anything like that that you think of as a memorable customer experience. Share some of those, some of your thoughts, some of your experiences in the chat. All right, now, as I read through them, I see some really great things. But the one thing that I don't see is a hot dog. And I'm guessing that for everybody, when you think of a memorable customer experience, a hot dog never comes to mind. But if you are a customer of Pal's Sudden Service believes that a hot dog can be the exact thing that creates a memorable customer experience. So this company was started in 1956 in Tennessee, and they have 30 different locations. And their distinctive customer experience that they deliver is around speed. That's their core competitive differentiator in a fast food market. Now, as you look across the entire fast food world, the average amount of time that it takes from the time that you order until you get your food is right under 76 seconds. But Pal's thinks that waiting that long for your food at a fast food restaurant is ridiculous. And it only takes them 18 seconds to have your meal ready. And if you go to the walk-up window, it's 12 seconds. Now, the next in line is Taco Bell, but they're almost a minute slower in that case. Now, for me, when I think about fast food and getting that food in 12 seconds, I'm thinking they're totally gonna mess up my order. I'm gonna ask them to hold the onions. There's gonna be onions on my order. They're gonna forget the fries. They'll give me the wrong shake. But that's not what you get at Pal's. And in fact, they have one of the highest accuracy for order records in all of fast food. Now, Pal's creates a memorable customer experience because they break people's expectations of what a fast food experience is like. And this is really important as you think about creating a memorable customer experience, is to think about what expectations do people have about your brand, about what you sell, and how you interact with them. Now, an expectation is this strong belief that we naturally build over time, that something will happen in a certain way based on past experience or how we want it to actually turn out in the future desire. So when we think about this, expectations and creating these memorable customer experiences, if all you're doing is meeting expectations, then all you're doing is performing at the status quo. And status quo is actually a Latin phrase that means existing state. So all you're doing when you meet expectations is essentially making people go, all right. They won't necessarily complain about you, but they certainly won't remember you and recommend you. So when we think about the word memorable, when it comes to a customer experience, it's something that's worth remembering or something that's easily remembered because the experience was an emotional one, because it was special or unusual. And the whole reason our brains remember things that we interacted with, experiences we had, is because it jogged our usual expectation, and that generates an emotion. And emotions are what we have that really inspire us to remember those memorable experiences. But to be truthful, there's nothing memorable about the status quo. And that's something that we really have to keep in mind as we look at where are we prioritizing and what is it that we're making important and what are we focusing on inside of our own work. So there's research that shows that companies believe that they deliver a much higher customer experience than what customers actually say that they're getting from brands. So this is research that came out from Bain & Company, and this gap between the green and the yellow bars, what companies believe they're delivering and what customers say they're delivering, is what I call the opportunity gap. And this is that gap that you have the ability to step into and create those memorable customer experiences that make you the brand that stand out in any industry that you work in. And as you can see, it is a huge opportunity gap. Now, when we look at that in terms of how well is our current customer experience working and how memorable is it, I have 3 questions for you. First, ask yourself, are we converting prospects into actual customers? The second one is, are we keeping the customers that we actually have? Now, this is something every organization should be tracking. It's called customer churn because it costs a lot more to acquire a new customer than it does to keep the existing one. So when we get customers, we want to make sure that they stay with us. That's just a smart business financial approach. Now, the third question is, are we making or losing money? Because the more customer churn you have, the harder it's going to be to actually make money at the end of the day. So as we go back and look at each of these questions in a little more detail, are we converting prospects? If you're not, or if you're struggling, the question is, do you really understand their pain gain model? What are the pain points that they have that they're trying to avoid that you can help them solve? And then on the other end is, what is it they're trying to gain? Is it efficiency? Is it more sales? Is it a better customer experience for their customers? What is it that they really are trying to accomplish that maybe you aren't understanding with your prospective customers? Now, with existing customers, it's a question of, do you understand how to consistently deliver value over a long period of time? What tends to happen in some organizations is that as soon as a prospect becomes a customer, they kind of go into the background and they aren't continually nurtured. People aren't checking in on them. You know, how was your experience? Are you happy with, how we've served you so far? How you were onboarded? What other needs do you have that we might be able to help? These are things that all make your existing customers more sticky by making sure that you're really building that relationship and looking at opportunities to grow your business across more departments and deeper within all of those departments. Now, the third question is, are we making or losing money? So if you answer questions 1 and 2 with a yes, you're probably making money. If you answer them with a no, you're probably struggling to either consistently see growth and revenue opportunities, or to keep it, or to avoid going the other direction than where you want to go with growth and revenue. Now, as we think about all of this in terms of a customer experience and making something very memorable and taking advantage of that gap, that opportunity gap, I like to share this quick example of how Zappos recognized a huge opportunity gap during COVID. It was during the first few months of COVID that they launched their Ask Us Anything customer service program. And it was a program where anybody from anywhere could email, call, or tweet to them and ask them for help with anything. Now, it was a time when many people were isolated and they couldn't go out and get groceries. They didn't know if stores were open. There were a lot of restrictions, and Zappos said, we want to help and delight people, not just their customers. And so they invited people around the world to ask them anything. And as we look at some of the questions that came in, they said, are you looking for restaurant recommendations near you for a special occasion? Like, are these even open? And people would ask, do you need a few moving options? Because even during this time, life had to go on for many people. So they were looking at how could we continue to deliver those memorable customer experiences. Now, for me, when I saw their post about looking to finally take that road trip you've been thinking about, it's very interesting because whatever it is you need, Zappos was there to help you with the answer. And that was exactly what I needed help with, because we had a family wedding and we didn't want to fly, so we were going to drive. But we have 3 teenage kids. And it came to mind that maybe our typical vehicle wouldn't be great for a 16-hour each way family trip. So I asked Zappos, I'm looking for advice on renting an RV. Can you help me? And then I used their hashtag customer service for anything. Within minutes, they responded and said, howdy, I've never rented an RV myself, but I can try looking up some advice online. What would you like to know? Now, they added a very interesting little detail at the end of their response to me, and that was the person's initials who was responding to me. So it didn't feel like anything that was automated. It felt like a real person on the other end of my questions who was trying to help me. So I gave this person a little bit more specifics. We need an RV big enough for 5 people, 3 teens, to travel 2,500 miles round trip plus sleep in for a week. What size would be good? Do I need a special driver's license? How can I get one? Or can I get one with a soundproof driver's seat? You know, road trips with teenagers. And their response was, I'm not seeing any options for a soundproof driving cabin. I think we both knew that was just a joke. You do not need a special driver's license to rent the RV. And then they go on to help me with answers to my questions. So in a matter of minutes, all I had to do is send social media posts out to them, and they gave me responses. So the questions that I needed help with, they created a very memorable customer experience in that moment. The former CEO of Zappos, Tony Heisch, said, our history has been about trying to provide the very best customer service and experience selling shoes online. But we want to do that. We want to help everyone navigate this new world. So they were looking at how can they take their typical approach to customer experience and expand it in a way that is helpful to people during a time when they really needed help. So your ability as a company to create these memorable customer experiences depends on a few things. The first is empathy. How well do you think like your customer? And I'll let you know this, your customer does not spend their entire day thinking about your product. Your product is just a fraction of their day. So what else do they think about? And how can you put yourself in their shoes? The second thing is how can you put a greater emphasis on the experience that you deliver versus only the product that you deliver? Because it's the experience that people have with brands that really make it memorable and build that relationship. And number 3 is how can you remove friction? I've worked with a lot of brands as we build out their customer experience journey who say, this is the way it has to be because this is how it works best within our company and how our departments interact. But the end result is that it creates a lot of friction for customers. So ask yourself, how do you actually create a memorable customer experience? This is the framework that I'd like to walk you through. I call it the FAME customer experience formula. There's 4 parts: functionality, ambiance, message, and employees. So if you're looking at setting up a sophisticated program, this is a framework to get started. And then once you do, you can look at how you're doing already in each of these 4 areas and essentially create an audit. So let's look at each of these 4 areas. Number 1, functionality is what you actually do. What do you deliver? Do you make something? Is it a service provider, such as an accountant or an attorney or an architect? But the question is, how well does what you actually sell work? I know I've bought things and I get them, whether it's products or, perhaps customer support, and I think this is not at all what I expected when I bought this service. So how well does the actual core of your business, what you sell every day, work? The product that you sell, the experience that you deliver. Is it helpful? Is it valuable? Is it valuable to your customer, not just what you want them to value? And is it memorable? You take something as simple as pizza, especially pizza for perhaps a college crowd. I know when I was in college, this is about how good the pizzas looked when I would order them with my friends at midnight when we'd been up late studying. And I know for me, I associated this with Domino's all the time, like worst pizza you could buy, but as a college student, I could afford it. So a lot of people liked it also because their guarantee was 30 minutes or less. But then Domino's started to focus on how they could create a more memorable customer experience that they did through their pizza tracker. And when people could actually watch their pizza being made, they actually wanted it to take more time from it to get from their order to their house, because they felt that the longer it took, that they would get a better product. So of the functionality of what they were actually buying. So they did slow down some of the time that it took between the order and the delivery of the pizza, because they had that empathy toward how people felt about the functionality, the quality of their product. So for Domino's, they shifted the functionality of actually ordering a pizza, and that's how they created a memorable customer experience. Number two is ambiance. Ambiance is the character and atmosphere of how you do business. So what does your experience look and feel like? People are often willing to overlook an inferior product if it has an amazing ambiance. I know I think of that sometimes when I go to restaurants. My husband and I are thinking about where to go to have a nice romantic dinner, and we'll say, I don't know, the food isn't so great, but oh, the views are amazing and the staff is so warm and welcoming. And that will help us make a choice on something focused on ambiance. Now, if we think about going into a retail store, shopping for something like running shoes, lots of times you walk in and there's just wall-to-wall options. And unless you buy exactly the same shoe every time you go in, it can feel overwhelming. Well, that's what Adidas understood. And that's why they created their shoe customizer. They know that everyone is different. The kind of shoes that I like to run in are probably very different from the kind of shoes that you like to run in. And so with the Adidas shoe customizer, people can customize what's important to them with their shoes. Sometimes it's how they fit on the feet, pronation, things like that. So they made it very specific, that experience, that ambiance around buying a shoe. So Adidas looked at, how can we take that ambiance and make that a memorable differentiator for our customer experience? And that's the shoe customizer for Adidas. Now, number three in the FAME model is messaging. How do you actually talk about what it is that you do? So it would be externally your branding, your marketing and communications, your sales messages. Internally, we often talk about brand purpose or employer branding. But thinking about that shift in messaging from only your product and the details of what you sell, and moving into understanding that power of brand purpose and why you serve the customers that you do. So when we look into some of the details of brand purpose, companies that are driven by purpose, they outperform the general market and they outperform comparison companies in their industry. And companies that have a culture that are based on purpose, they have bigger revenues, they created more jobs faster, and their stock price grew. They also are better at retaining the employees that they have. Now, when we look at an example of a company that does this really well, this is Centene. As you can see where the big red arrow is, they talk about their purpose as transforming the health of the community, one person at a time. Centene, it's a nonprofit Medicaid plan that was founded in 1984 by a former hospital bookkeeper. Her name was Elizabeth Bryn, but she goes by Betty. And she built the guiding principles of the entire company based on her experience of working in, of growing up and working in an orphanage in Milwaukee County. But now Centene is one of the largest Medicaid managed care organizations in the country, and they're a national leader in long-term care because they really focus on this messaging and a true belief in the purpose of the work that they do every single day. So through all of their efforts, they really believe that the individual believes such careful attention and access to high quality healthcare and with dignity as well. So that's a very, very important part of their messaging that isn't just something they do for branding and sales on the outside, but it's a core belief that people have in their heart who work for this company. Now, as we look at this for Centene, they are able to make their messaging fundamental to how they deliver a memorable customer experience, because it all comes down from Betty, the founder, how people make decisions, how they talk about their work every single day and the work that they do. Now, the last part of the FAME framework is employees, and employees are the people who make your brand actually work. We often think of companies as these entities, but these entities are made up by people who do the work every single day. So no experience in any form will really be successful unless you acknowledge and address and really nurture the relationship part of what employees contribute to your customer experience and delivering those memorable experiences. People make decisions about the experience because it's delivered by real human people. We know how we feel about chatbots. We know how we feel about getting stuck in a tech loop where you have a question and none of the prompts on the phone tree or online tree will answer them. And it's frustrating. And that's why the role of employees is so important. One company that does a really good job of this is Stagecoach. And Stagecoach is the UK's biggest bus and tour operator. They have operations that go all around London and then interconnections with smaller areas right outside of London. Now, from the bus to the tram to the coach drivers to engineers to cleaners and customer service staff, they have over 24,000 employees. There was previously the culture of the company and with employees was very militaristic. It was very, this is the way that it will always be done. And no one dared question authority. But it really was impacting customer service and customer experience. And they could see it affecting the profitability and revenue of the company. So real leaders realized that they needed to shift how they delivered what they did, how they interacted with employees first, and that would ultimately change the customer experience that was being delivered. So they reached an opportunity for a technology that helped employees better communicate with each other. And they looked at opportunities for digital transformation to keep people in contact who don't normally see other coworkers, but they needed to know what was going on and needed to have updates and be made aware of things very quickly. So they created a digital app, and it helped them also become more engaged with the company culture. They saw that by communicating with their employees better, that they had much greater cohesion and understanding between all of the employees about their roles and what the company was all about. Some of it they saw with the digital app is that 86% of users open the app every single day. That was their point of contact. Nearly 90% of the drivers open the app 6 times a day. And there was a 46% increase in employee satisfaction. But I think another statistic that's really important is that they had a 79% employee engagement score. And as we look at all of the challenges that we have right now with employee engagement and retention and talent acquisition, this focus on employee engagement is really crucial at looking at how we can create that memorable customer experience. So that's why Stagecoach really focused on making employees key to shifting from a bus-centric to a passenger-centric frame of mind. So really shifting the focus from product focus to experience focused. And that's how they created their memorable customer experience. This is the new formula to look at your approach to customer experience. And it's one that you can go through and analyze each different pillar. Now, you probably won't be able to work on every one of them at the same time, but where's your biggest pain point? What's the biggest priority for your customer? Those are things to ask. If we go back and we look at the FAME model and how PALS measures up, definitely at 12 to 18 seconds to deliver an order that's almost guaranteed to be error-free, they have functionality down. They have an amazing ambiance. People can recognize it everywhere. Their message is consistent and very clear, and they have extremely passionate employees. This is your opportunity to create a truly memorable customer experience for your company. Ask yourself, where do I have the biggest pain and where do I have the biggest opportunity to gain? I'm Carla Johnson. Thank you for joining me today, and also thank you to Allegra Marketing Print Mail and Image 360 for inviting me to be a part of this webinar today. And then Monica, do we have any questions from anyone?
I'm not seeing any questions come through.
I know we have a few minutes. If anybody has a question that you'd like to drop into the chat, we can read through it and answer any that you might have.
Okay, one question came in. Where do you recommend someone starts evaluating their customer experience?
I think if you want an overall big picture, I would go through each of the 4 pillars. How functional is what you sell? Do you have a lot of customer service calls saying, this doesn't work, I need help, I have questions? That could be create a better experience if you thought of them up front. When it comes to ambiance, how well do people like the way they do business with you? When it comes to messaging, are you messaging from the perspective of what matters to the customer, or are you messaging things that are just product specific about what you sell? Now I want to be careful, or just be clear about, there is a time and a place to talk about the specifics of what you sell, but that's something later in the story. When we look at messaging, we always have to put our customer or our prospect first in how we talk and address their needs first. And then later we talk about the details of our product, because they do want to know that it's reliable and the specifications and details of what you sell. And then last, employees. There's a lot of companies who are really struggling to either attract employees or to keep the talent that they already have. So you can do an audit, self-audit that goes across the FAME framework, or if you know where your biggest pain point is, I'd suggest starting there.
Okay, great. Another question is, what marketing materials have the biggest influence on the customer experience?
That is completely dependent on your business, on what industry that you're in, and what matters to your buyers. So the greatest way to understand which materials have the greatest influence is to ask your customers and prospects, where do they go to find information when they are trying to solve a problem, do homework, do due diligence on buying something? There's a lot that we tend to assume as marketing and sales people, and even as business leaders, that we want our customers to want. But the only way to really understand what matters to your customers and to help them in a way that they want to be helped is to get to know your customers really, really well. And it goes beyond just collecting data. It needs to be phone conversations, face-to-face conversations, focus groups, gatherings, getting people together and to really talk, because oftentimes we limit the marketing materials that we create and the sales materials to only describe the products or services that we sell. But there's that big opportunity gap between what our customers are wanting and what we're delivering. And I tell you, if you reach out and have conversations with your customers, that will right there make you a big differentiator, because a lot of companies never ever take that effort.
Okay, and last question we have is the experience also important in the B2B space?
Absolutely. And that's my big heavy background is B2B. And I think oftentimes because B2B things can be, it's a nickname, boring to boring. But I think because of that, we have this impression that people care more about the products that we sell. But I always say when somebody gets up in the morning and they drive to work and maybe they drive through the coffee shop and they maybe run an errand and then they get to work, they don't think of themselves as, oh, when I'm buying coffee, I'm a consumer buyer, or when I run this errand, I'm a consumer. And now that I'm at work, I'm a B2B buyer. They just know they're buyers. And so the interesting thing about B2B is that whether you realize it or not, the benchmark that you're being judged against for creating that memorable customer experience is actually the experience that people have with consumer brands. And so if you can elevate your customer experience and make it memorable as a B2B company, that will really, really help set you apart.
Okay, that's all I'm seeing. So thank you so much, Carla. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you. It was great to be here today.